Hey everyone, welcome to Checking In with Changemakers with Be the Change Media Network. I am so excited to introduce my guest that I have for you today. Before we get started with that, my name is Lily Mott, and this is the show where I get to catch up with past guests of Be the Change podcast, and it is going to be a very exciting episode. Today, I am going to be featuring Ziyaan Virji, and he is a CEO and the founder of For the Menstruator and the Leaders of Today podcast, which is a new venture. So I'm really excited to talk with him about it. Well, not new, but new since we last talked. So I'm really excited to talk with him. He was featured all the way back in episode 30 of Be the Change podcast, and we talked all the way back in December of 2020. So it's been a while, and I'm really excited to talk with Ziyaan. So I'm going to go ahead and invite him, and we'll get started. Perfect. All right.
Hello,
Welcome.
how's it going?
How are you? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I didn't realize December 2020, huh?
Yeah. I know, isn't that crazy? Every single time that I tell people, like, the number of the podcast is crazy to me just because this week's 190, which is just like insane. And December 2020.
That's
That's just scary.
crazy, yeah.
I know, I
But
know.
it's so nice to see how like you've been so consistent over the years and like
Yeah.
just
Thank
building,
you.
and I'm super excited to also hear about like the media network as a whole and more about that too.
Of course. Well, I'm so excited to hear what you're up to because I've been following along with everything. So I'm going to get kind of a behind the scenes look and get your perspective. So let's get started. I'm going to have you do the same thing that you did on the podcast, where you did a quick intro of yourself. Tell me a little background on you. Tell me a little bit about your story, and then we'll go deeper from there. But I'd love to get started with that whenever you're ready.
Awesome. So, my background, I'm from East Africa. I was born and raised in Tanzania, and then spent my last 4 years of boarding school in Kenya. And that's where I kind of got started in terms of my, I guess, leadership journey. The background is I'm not gonna share the full story. People should go listen to the podcast if they want to know the full story. But basically, I got dengue fever, and that led to this whole experience where um, I lost 3 weeks of my life, and eventually that kind of inspired me to think about what my purpose is. And coincidentally, when I got back to school, I had the opportunity to start my own nonprofit in the menstrual health space. It's been 6 years since For the Menstruator, and we've managed to, grow and scale to helping over 25,000 people in 10 countries around the world. And then I moved to Canada 3 years ago for university, and I'm currently in Vancouver in British Columbia. And yeah, as part of my time here, I'm in business school, and in basically early last year, I started a podcast that eventually turned out to become this newsletter, and now a full-fledged company where we have multiple things happening. And so super excited to chat about that. And yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm excited. Let's get started with For the Menstruator. Tell me about that. Tell me about how that's been going, kind of how you've managed to continue it. I mean, 6 years, that's huge. And I remember that was the focus of our episode all the way back in 2020. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so for the menstruator, especially over the last couple of years, when I moved to Canada, it was quite difficult to do a lot of the work that I was doing just because I was so kind of focused on the on ground impact work. And we've had a team of like 150 young people from around the world, which has been super exciting. But I think a couple of years ago, I decided to take a step back, which was a result of many things. I think when I moved to Canada, one, I felt very burnt out. I'd spent basically from 2017 to end of 2020
Hmm.
on this mission, but didn't realize that um, I was giving up something whilst doing that. And um, the cost of everything that I was doing in terms of how much time I was spending doing all the work was my personal well-being. And so when I moved to Canada, especially, it was still COVID. Um, it was one really hard to find a sense of community, and I felt very disoriented just moving to a completely new country, right? And so I definitely took a lot of time off, and it was quite a journey when I moved here. And then eventually I realized that um, with for the menstruator work, I felt I was in my comfort zone quite a bit, and didn't feel as inspired as I was in terms of being on ground and having the impact. And I haven't officially like stepped down, but definitely taken a lot of steps back. So a lot of our work continues on ground. But in terms of my involvement at the moment, it's on a more advisory level
Mm-hmm.
versus being involved in the day to day. But I feel like that's something a lot of people don't talk about. Like, you see, you've interviewed like 100 plus
Yeah.
change makers, and I think it's very inspiring. Starting at an early age and having such a big impact, but no one really talks about some of the costs associated with it. And you see a lot of change makers, especially where they're in the phase of that I'm in right now, eventually stop their work and completely go a different direction, right? And it takes some of them don't even recover from that. And so I think that's a conversation that's important to be had. And I think a lot of that also comes from the lack of investment in young people and the type of work that we do, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people, as inspired as they are by the causes that they work on, the reality is subconsciously they are also doing the work for the other types of opportunities that come with it. So things like, having a really good resume to get a scholarship or to get into an Ivy League school or whatever. Getting all these speaking opportunities, growing their personal brand. But when all of those things get taken out from it, the question really lies if they continue doing their work or not. And we've seen so many cases of different outcomes. And so, and what's really sad is you get to a point where you're almost graduating from university and you have to kind of think about, how am I gonna pay my bills?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will I do? Can I afford to go full time on my nonprofit? Um, and you either see some people, which are very few cases that go full time, others still continue the work, but they do it on a very small kind of level, and then and end up doing completely random jobs, and they struggle in that sphere because they spend their whole life working on something completely different. And so it's been a interesting journey, but it's also opened up a lot of opportunities for myself. And I feel like these are conversations more people should have when we're talking about, being a young change maker and trying to make an impact at an early age.
Yeah, I think that's a very honest conversation. I feel like it's yeah, I think one that people don't want to talk about because it's kind of the what do you do when maybe you're not a student anymore? Kind of like you were saying, when all of a sudden that net kind of drops out and you have to figure out how you're going to make money, how you're going to feed yourself, how you're going to pay rent, all of that kind of stuff becomes very real challenges. So I really appreciate you talking about that. I think that's the perfect segue to talk about your podcast and all of the work that you've been doing. Tell me about what that transition was like for you to go from university and then into starting this. Just tell me about that journey because I'm so intrigued. And this was after we talked, like a good amount after we talked. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to learn about the whole
yeah.
story.
And so it was in my first couple of years in university. I tried out a bunch of random projects, startup ideas. I'm in business school, so always surrounded by new ideas, and try to build a bunch of like random tech projects.
Yeah.
But Leaders of Today, what was funny was Leaders of Today as a podcast was actually an idea that I had during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I actually filmed 10 episodes virtually. Got really cool guests, edited them, but never actually released anything because I had imposter syndrome and I thought no one would actually listen to this. And I think at the time during COVID, everyone had like a podcasting phase. And so I'm like, I don't want to be another podcast. So never released that. And then um, so the idea was always kind of in my head. And then basically in 2022, I got two brand deals on my socials. I did one with LinkedIn and one with the skincare brand that was launching a prize for young people.
Mhm.
And that was my first time kind of getting paid for creating content. And I'm like, hey, I just got like $5,000 from these two brand deals. How about I kind of use that money for something I've always wanted to do, right? And although I was a broke like college student and I could have really used that money for myself, I was like, got this money from social media, let's reinvest it. And so I'm like, I had this podcast idea, but I never I would always think that in-person podcasts are super
Yeah.
cool, like having video and that element. And so that's when I kind of decided to hire a team. I only had the budget to hire this video production company for 2 weekends. I asked my previous boss that I did an internship at. I asked him if I could use his office at the weekend as our studio, and I'd reached out to 16 people, and we recorded 4 episodes each day on 2 weekends, and that was kind of the launch of Leaders of Today, and what we and how we got there.
Yeah, yeah, that's so exciting. I love the idea of the in-person podcast too, because I feel like the conversations are just so fun to be able to have when you're sitting with someone and you can see them, and I think that's awesome. So tell me about the event that you hosted in Toronto. I think that this is very timely, so I'd love to know more about this. I saw your posts. I did a little LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Instagram stalking. Tell me about that.
So before I talk about the Toronto event, I'll kind of share with you what happened between launching the podcast and hosting
Yeah,
this
yeah.
event. Basically, we did the podcast from January 2023 to end of April 2023. My hypothesis of investing the money was, hey, if we post consistently for 4 months, release one episode each week, do socials every day, um, we'll probably get good enough numbers to eventually then go to a sponsor or someone that can fund us to do a second season. And so that was kind of the hypothesis. But end of April came around, and I'm like, our numbers are right. You know how long it takes to scale a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to do it consistently for like 2 to 3 years to see real numbers. And so at that point, I kind of quit. I like in my head, I Leaders of Today was like another one of those projects that I just tried something new and didn't work out. I then moved to Toronto over the summer for an incubator I was part of, and I started building another like tech company in the fintech loyalty space to help nonprofits with their fundraising. Um, Started doing that, had ups and downs with that. And then in mid October, whilst I was building that company, I realized um, with the podcast, we also had a newsletter, and we had a couple thousand subs on it. And the reason why we started the newsletter was that young people were telling us that it's so great to be inspired by the podcast, but how do we actually get started with our work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, and how do we actually implement or amplify our existing work? And so I'm like, I had a couple ideas in terms of how to rebuild the newsletter, especially growing it on LinkedIn. And so I just started like testing out a bunch of stuff on the side of my desk, and we basically went from a couple thousand subs in mid-October to we hit 10K at the end of November, and then basically 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, we hit 100K on the newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
and that journey has kind of been really inspiring to see, especially in terms of the feedback of young people and how the newsletter grew so organically, especially on LinkedIn. And we had all these posts go viral where we'd share opportunities with young people, and it just goes to show the need, and how young people really want opportunities, and they feel like there's no access to a lot of things, right? And so we did that, and we continue to build the newsletter, and then the event is kind of part of our overall um, goal of building community. I think Leaders of Today, at the core of it, is our goal is to build one of the largest communities of young people around the world. And the way I kind of look at Leaders of Today right now is in three C's and a T. And so we have our content side. Actually, I'll go with four C's.
Okay.
I because that's hard to remember. we'll go with four C's. The first C is content, and so under that we have the newsletter, social media, that whole thing. Our second thing is community. Under that, we plan to host a lot of events, especially in person, and then eventually maybe have a community platform of some sort. Um, Third C is consulting, and so we have a couple of clients that we're working with. We have a newsletter agency where we try to build other newsletters, and then we also help with strategy for any organizations or brands that want to engage with Gen Z and young people. And then our last C is kind of like we're also building some tech. I feel like that side of me is still kind of alive, and I think tech just has the power to scale and do so much good. And so we're also building some tech in the back end to get things rolling.
That's so exciting. Yeah, that's amazing. So now tell me about the event. How did it go?
So the event was great. It was in Toronto. We had 75 people, all young people that are super cool, super inspiring, in different spaces. And so we had, people in the arts, people that were running businesses that have raised millions of dollars. We had change makers that have had so much impact, public speakers. It was just a great kind of space to really connect and have in-depth conversation, and build authentic relationships. So our description for the event, the first line was, "This is not a networking event," because you see a lot of events. One networking events feel so intimidating. There's this weird weird kind of dynamic that goes on. You have the people that have something or have accomplished something, and the people that aspire to be like those people, and it's super like transactional and intimidating. And so for us, it was like, this is not a networking event, and we really kind of focus on how do we build deep, authentic relationships with each other. And if you look at the stats, Gen Z, we have the lowest scores of social connectedness, according to a report last year. And because it's so ironic because we're so connected online and virtually, but as connected as we are virtually, we are as disconnected in person. And because our generation also faced COVID in such a critical point in our life, a lot of us don't even know how to hold a conversation or go up to someone new, right? And so for us, our focus is really how do we build deeper, authentic relationships that can last a lifetime, and then the networking component of it, once you do that, comes naturally, right? And so that's our goal. That was our goal with that, and it was quite a great success, great turnout. And now we're thinking, how do we kind of scale that in different cities, in different places around the world, and provide more experiences and spaces for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea of it's not a networking event. I think that's so important. And I hadn't really thought about it, but that is the perfect way to put it, where there's these people that you're supposed to be talking to who have accomplished something, and everybody else is kind of groveling a little bit to talk with them or to kind of
Exactly.
glean some of their wisdom. So I think that's awesome because the videos, it looked like everyone was talking and it seemed like it was so fun. And I recognized a couple people. I've like featured a couple of them, and I was
Exactly.
like, that's awesome. What a space. That's so cool. So um, tell me about, I would just love to kind of pick your brain for a little bit more advice. You've kind of gone through these different projects and you've been so honest about trying different things, and maybe things don't work, but you're putting yourself out there. And I think that you would be regretting some of these things if you didn't try them. And do you have any advice for people who may be thinking, wow, I'd love to start this project, or, kind of that imposter syndrome, like you were talking about originally with Leaders of Today? Or, yeah, tell me about that. Just give me some advice if anyone's listening that feels that way and needs to kind of get over that barrier. What advice would you
Yeah.
have for them?
Well, first, I don't think like you don't need the advice because you're doing it all. But for anyone
Hey,
that's
I could
listening,
always use it. I could always use it.
for anyone
Always.
for anyone that's listening that has an idea or a passion or a project that they're working on, or has ideas for a project that they want to work on, I think the way I kind of look at it is, especially if you're a young person, like at this age in our lives, as long as you're in school, you have nothing to lose. And even in your 20s, once you graduate, like you don't have family to pay for. If you're still in school, like you don't have rent to pay for. Like And you trying out different, like the feeling of regret is way worse than the feeling of failure. um and you don't, and I've been in both boats of regret and failure, and I can definitely attest to that. Like I just think that as part of my university degree, I've tried different things, and you just gotta do it. You know, like you don't overthinking, just put it out there. um and think of like, what does an MVP of your project look like? Put it out, get feedback, iterate, and then go through that whole process again and again. And eventually you'll get to what you want. And if anything that comes out of it, you'll just figure out. Let's say it doesn't work out, you'll just figure out what you don't want to be doing, or what you're not necessarily passionate about. And so, for me, I've done everything from, I try to host I try to create tech around like a ticketing events platform, like an Eventbrite, but for university students. Um, try this fintech loyalty platform, iterate and pivoted with that. I've done everything from drop shipping to like the what, like when you whatever you search on YouTube that says how to make your first million as a 20-year-old. Like I've done it all, and so I think it's important to just kind of put yourself out there. And it's funny because all the projects that I look back, including for the Menstruator and some of the other successes, like that has all led me to what I'm doing right now. Time will tell if the years of today becomes a success or not, or if it's something I continue to work on long term. But um, I think it feels like everything I've worked on has kind of led me to this point, and I'm super passionate about this kind of mission, and it's so aligned with everything I've built over the last 6 7 years. And so yeah, just kind of do it, don't overthink it. And you honestly have nothing to lose at this point. um One extra thing I'll also add is I recently came across, so I met Sahil Bloom last November. I don't know if you know Sahil Bloom,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
um and my one question to him was like, how do we, like, what does it mean to have, like, success at an early age, like, and how do I kind of deal with that? Because I always feel that pressure, because I did this big thing when I was a teenager, and now I have this pressure to keep up with that. And it feels overwhelming sometimes, right? And his response to that was, if anything, don't look at it in that point of view. Just think of it as like, how do you use that as leverage for whatever the next thing you're working on, right? And be more strategic with it. And so then I go back home and I do some research on what does leverage actually mean, and how do you actually use something as leverage. And I came across this idea of the 4 C's of leverage by Naval. And the idea is that the 4 C's are: one, collaboration. So exactly what you and I are doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you collaborate with other
Mm-hmm.
people, you're more likely, to reach towards whatever you're working towards. The second one is code, and so we live in a time where everything has a tech component to it with AI and everything that's going on. And so if you know how to code, or you understand code, like that can already take you to increase your luck surface area, and you can use that as leverage. The third one is content, and so you're doing this, I'm trying to do this. Content just increases your luck surface area by so much, and you can reach people where you couldn't reach before, right? By creating content. And then the last one is capital, and so if you have a lot of money to just throw away, you can get to places way faster. But as a young person, if you don't have capital, the rest of the three can be learned or can be implemented. And so right now I've been thinking about, with everything that I'm doing right now, I think of it in that same kind of perspective, and how do I use all my previous experiences as leverage to reach whatever my goals are right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also kind of answered my last question for you, but I'm going to ask if you want to add anything to it. I'm going to ask you the classic question. Lots of young people want to create change, want to make a difference, but they may not know how to get started with that work. What advice do you have for those young people who may be listening? But you gave a great answer already. So is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, so leaders of today. The reason why it's called leaders of today is, my grade three teacher. So when I used to submit my homework late in grade three, um, especially my maths homework, my grade three teacher always used to say, I used to be like, hey, I'll submit it tomorrow. And then I'd keep saying that. And she's like, tomorrow never comes. And that kind of stuck with me over the years. And being in the social impact change making space, a lot of people refer to young people as leaders of tomorrow. But applying that concept of tomorrow never comes, as young leaders, we're not only leaders of tomorrow, we're also leaders of today, right? And so if you have an idea, you have a passion, if you have something you want to try out, don't wait until tomorrow because tomorrow never comes, and start today. And it's very catchy and easy to say, but it's harder to implement. I think just starting small, and not kind of attaching yourself to big outcome goals like, hey, I'm gonna reach 10,000 followers on my Instagram, or hey, I'm gonna raise $1 million, or whatever it may be. I think attaching yourself towards process kind of goals, um, such as instead of getting to 10K followers, I will post 5 times a week on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram and TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Or instead of raising $1 million, I will talk to I'll reach out to 100 VCs, and reach out to 10 every day, or whatever it may be, right? But really thinking in terms of processes versus outcomes, and eventually the outcomes will kind of come on its own once you're showing up every day, right? But I can go on all day talking about this stuff, but
So much advice.
um, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I feel like it's amazing. I was just thinking about all of the quotes and things that you just, I feel like you're speaking in sound bites, which I love. As a podcaster, that's perfect. But there's so many quotes I can pull out of that. I think that you gave great advice. And I actually remember, I wanted to put you on the spot here and just compliment you, but I remember a LinkedIn post that you did, and you probably don't remember. You're so active on LinkedIn, which is awesome. I need to take a lesson from you with that. But you posted something about just that idea of having more specific goals. And I remember you commented on somebody's New Year's resolutions, I think, or something. This is so specific. But I remember being like, that is so brilliant, because you were talking about how you need to make them more focused on what you can do rather than these kind of larger outcomes, instead of like outcome focused
Yeah.
goals. You need to think about the steps that you need to take. I just thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
So I wanted to compliment you.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, like, especially, so I never used to set goals
Hmm.
for the
Hmm.
new year. And this was kind of my first year like setting goals, and I went down this whole rabbit hole of like figuring out what best practices of doing that are, and that was one of the things, like just kind of thinking in terms of process and what's in your control. And I feel
Yeah,
like if
yeah.
you do everything that's in your control, even if you don't achieve the specific outcomes that you want, you're still gonna feel like you've accomplished something, and in the process, you're just gonna learn and grow so much. And so, yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're
Really?
talking about
Okay.
in terms of the
Okay.
comment that I had. But no, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it was also just I saw it and I was like, this just makes so much sense. And it was kind of a simple concept when you say it like that, but I was like, why haven't I thought about like doing that for myself? Why am I making these giant lofty goals when I could just be thinking, what can I do today? That's way more
yeah,
important. So I really appreciate that. And I love the all of the resources that you're putting out. I think it's awesome. All of these different opportunity sheets and things that you're posting. That leads me to my next question. What are the best ways for people to connect with you and get involved in all this work that you're doing?
yeah. So I love for people to just kind of subscribe to the newsletter. Once you're on there, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved in terms of what's best for you. But only call to action, please subscribe to the newsletter, join 100,000 other young people like yourself. And we really want to build community in person and online. And if there's any way that I can support anyone, I love to help add value in any way. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. And I'll put all of the info to contact you in the description, because this is going to be posted on the Be the Change podcast feed as well, so people can go back and listen to it. But thank you so much for coming on. This was so fun, and I'm so glad that we got to catch up. And I'm so excited to follow along with all of this work that you're doing, because I think our missions are very aligned, and I am so excited to support you and just follow along with everything. So thank you so much.
Likewise, likewise. Yeah, thank you for again the opportunity. I didn't get to hear a lot about the new media
We'll have to
network,
do
but
we'll have to do another one.
another
We'll
catch
we'll
up.
do another one. For
um,
sure, for sure.
but yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, super excited and super inspired by you and everything you're working on. I have a lot of respect for people that like are consistent and three like podcasting is so tough. And you've seen all the stats of like the number of podcasts that drop after the 10th episode, and so you doing it for 3 years is just oh man, I respect that
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you. I think it's exactly what you were talking about with your work though. It's just this passion. I feel like I love doing it so much that it's not like work.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it. But my issue is that soon I need to figure out how to monetize it a little bit more, but that comes down the line. So
Yeah,
I'm not worried
and
about that
hey,
yet.
we'll chat about that. I'm
Absolutely,
sure there's
absolutely.
a lot of ideas
That's
we can exchange.
yeah, that's your wheelhouse. So I'll reach out. But
Awesome.
thank you to everyone who's listening, who's watching us. If you have any questions for me, email me at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or reach out to this Instagram account, Be the Change Media Network, and tune in to listen to this week's episode of Be the Change Podcast tomorrow. But until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys, and thank you so much again for coming on. This is great.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.